Murdorf and the Mortal Flaw, Book 1, Chapter 23, The Tomb of Murdorf. It was twilight when the riders in the east reached the Tomb of Murdorf. The twisted face of a man stricken with terror was carved in stone, his hands stretched out in a futile attempt to defend himself. The statue stood erect on a mound of dirt at the base of the Hill of Descent. Darkness quickly fell upon the hill, and the clouds wrapped around the full moon like a snug coat. A billow of haze rolled across the sky, snuffing out the twinkling of the stars. It was pitch dark. Navi held the torch in front of the statue. Flames danced in the lines of anxiety that etched in the stone face. You could see the dread of death in Murdorf's eyes. "This is where it all began," Gamonza said, looking up at the statue. "This is where what all began?" asked the mace. The older riders proceeded to tell the tale, each adding their own set of details. Navi began. "This is where Darvan spread his influence by giving the cursed sword away." "Darvan was once a dignitary in the kingdom of Shai Kadesh," Boldar interrupted. "He was a trusted official and friend of King Justice. After years of serving second in rank, Darvan became hungry for power and attempted to assassinate King Justice. He made a sword, the first ever crafted." "How could he assassinate the king when the king was immortal?" asked Cosby. "He was aware of some of the story, but not all of the fine points." Navi jumped in. "The quest for power defines all logic. Its appetite for control and power and fame seeks only personal satisfaction. The thirst for power surpasses all reason." Cosby wondered if there was more to the story. Why would he try to kill the immortal king if it couldn't be done? Perhaps it could be done, and that was what the king feared. Cosby wondered to himself. Cosby wasn't sure, but he kept his thoughts to himself, turning them over in his head. Darvan's quest for power knew no logic, Navi continued. He tried to seize the throne, but of course King Justice discovered his plot, though not before Darvan had deceived a small number of others with his trickery and deceit, winning their favor through flattery and a show of self-importance. The king brought everyone involved in the matter to swift judgment, casting them out of the kingdom of Shai Kadesh. Then he placed a curse on the sword. "Cursed be Darvan and his sword, for he sought for power above his lord. Cursed be the sword of Darvan that rose up to kill. May all who accept it gain a corrupt will. Their people will die and lose their immortality. They will degenerate and decline in morality. May their bodies, souls, and spirits become empty and bare, unable to find rest, trapped in despair. From generation to generation their sin innate, their likeness only can they propagate. But Darvan himself will not perish, because the love for power was what his heart relished. Trapped between life and death, in appearance you will be defaced. Unable to rule, you will be a disgrace. This sword in your heart, driven by an immortal king who is upright, you will then be destroyed, and death will become your plight." Gamonza took up the story now. Angry as those who had betrayed him, King Justice put a curse on all those who fell into cahoots with Darvan. "I bet those bloody little accursed Dervs sure do regret teaming up with Darvan. They have been small and ugly ever since," he joked. "Kinda like Mongard here," Osney said, laughing and elbowing the boy. "Oh, watch it," said Mongard, poking Osney with the end of his knife that he was using to carve out a piece of wood. Navi stepped in now to tell the tale before Boldar grabbed at the chance. "For many years, Darvan tried to deceive someone into taking the sword of power that he might propagate this evil. Finally, the Dark One convinced a young king named Teshar to take the sword. Teshar was a weak man. Darvan lied to him. He told him his brother Murdorf was seeking to take his throne and that the sword would make him more powerful. He told Teshar that he could stand as the supreme immortal king, taking King Justice's place. Teshar believed the lie and took up the cursed sword. Soon the sword had possessed Teshar's very heart. He sought to destroy the brother he now despised. He killed his brother, Murdorf, in this very spot. Slowly the subjects of the kingdom began to lose their immortality. The evil of the Sword of Darvan was now alive and well among the inhabitants of humanity, and many sought its power. Teshar had been corrupted by the sword and became Darvan's puppet king. He began to rule ruthlessly, becoming a tyrant with delusions of deity, demanding the allegiance and worship of the people. Men were forced into slavery and exploited for his personal, political, and financial success. Boldar took up the tale, eager to share more intricate details of the sword's history. One day, Hambry, a king in the southwest, desired the sword of power for himself. He poisoned Teshar, who did not die but merely lay unconscious for 2 days. Hambry stole the sword, taking it to his own kingdom. He became a ruthless tyrant, just as Teshar had been. He, too, brought the curse upon his subjects, who then became mortal. Then Teshar became well again. He hunted the sword until it drove him mad. As the sword passed down into the hands of the kings, and each became obsessed with it, one by one entire kingdoms slowly became mortal, and their kings turned to tyrants, ruling over their people and enslaving them. Greed grew in their hearts, and wherever the sword ruled, evil was more prevalent. People turned from good to evil, gaining corrupt wills, just as the curse proclaimed. Some even chose to join Darvan's ranks, becoming warriors in his kingdom. They fell under the most severe curse. Each time a kingdom fell to mortal conditions, their offspring entered the world as mortal men, just as the curse promised. Osney stepped in now. Dirge were immortals who joined Darvan at the beginning of his rebellion. But now all Dervs have the same status. Some have greater authority and rank, though. Riders of Quadar used to be mortal men just like us, but they fell under the evil influence of Darvan. Their minds have been darkened, poisoned by the deceit, and manipulated by Darvan. Navi chimed in again. Good kings began to seek the sword, thinking they could put an end to Darvan with it. But every king who got his hands on the bloody sword yielded to its evil. It is a cursed sword, after all. So here we are today, with only one kingdom remaining immortal, and only one king who can destroy Darvan. If King Justice fails, we are forever doomed to the tyranny of Darvan. King Justice won't fail, Osney proclaimed. He's got what others lacked. Amace was still puzzled. Whatever happened to Teshar? The bloody scamp became so obsessed with trying to get that sword back, it drove him practically insane, Navi said, glancing over at the hunk of wood Mongard was carving away at. He murdered many in his court. In the end, he drove his own sword, the one he had since considered useless, through his own heart. Lust for power would drive you bloody crazy. So what became of the sword then? Asked Amace. Boldar, ever the pedant, began to give a timeline of the history of kings and the sword, adding far more details than the story required. I don't think he expected a history of every king, Gamonza interrupted. He could see where this was going. Oh, right, sorry, I do get carried away. What about King Chess? Asked Cosby, sounding alarmed. Do you think he wants the sword? Gamonza knew the man, but even when you think you know someone, people sometimes disappoint. He stood up for the man and hoped the king wouldn't fall under the sway of the cursed sword. He knew the king had issued safety measures, but that was no guarantee. By bringing the sword on the journey would have been even riskier. What about King Justice? What if he too succumbs to the sword's power? I mean, why should we expect him to do something that no one else has been able to do? Seemed like a reasonable question to Cosby, who wasn't holding as much confidence in the immortal king in light of the history of the other immortal kings. There was silence for a moment. Everyone knew that the question was valid. Finally, Navi spoke up. He's the only immortal king left and all we have to hope in. If he desired more power, he could have it by now. He has withstood its evil presence throughout the ages. After a lengthy pause, Sagron felt compelled to find out another detail. If you don't mind me asking, he offered, where did you find the sword of power? Where it was found at Shilly-Shally Ford, answered Navi. It was in a pond with a corpse gripping it. Shilly-Shally Ford, blurted Amace. Isn't there a prophecy about that? The boy said. Yes, Navi answered, looking suspiciously at Amace. But how is it that you know of this prophecy? Only the prophets had access to the scrolls, and only kings and friends of the prophets have access to their wisdom. Many that rode with them knew of this prophecy because they had been long-time friends of the prophets. Amace would have had access to neither, having lived in a remote village. Sure, many legends and stories have run their course in time, but knowledge of this nature was not broadcast. Amace was silent. Navi eyeballed the boy, curious and uncertain about him in every way. So what's it like? The power of that sword, I mean, Mongard asked as he kept whittling away at the wood that was starting to take shape now. Dangerous, Navi said. You felt it? Mongard asked. Yes, Navi answered. But no one in the group has more experience with this sword than Windsor. Darvan deceived Windsor and even forced him to hold the blade. What did Windsor do? Cosby was curious, even though he knew where Windsor stood. He told that bloody scamp what he could go. He held it in his very own hands and felt its power radiate. He felt as though the sword was calling to him, making him feel powerful. He said the power he felt from the sword scared him, and he threw it back at Darvan and fled, vowing never to touch that thing again. After so much talk about the Sword of Darvan, the riders gathered close to the fire, bundled underneath their blankets, and drifted off to sleep. Awakened by beams of a glowing light, Amace sat up. Wrapping his blanket around himself, he stood up and crept over to observe the statue of Murdorf. It was radiating with soft amber light. The statue called to him. Amace, Amace, listen to what I tell you. You have not become a part of this circle by accident. This is your destiny. You have been chosen to bear the burden of the sword for a season. It will be your burden to bear, and yours alone. It will be your responsibility to resist its power, for you will be the burden bearer. If you fail, you will rule mankind under its power. But know this, mankind will be destroyed, and so will you. My blood cries out for justice and for peace. When the time comes, and you will know when the time is, take up the sword and stand firm. Stand firm, Amace, stand firm. The light of the statue now dissipated, and the darkness of the night overtook Amace as he pulled the blanket tightly around himself, shielding himself from the cold wind. I'm too young. I'm too unskilled, too unlearned, too small. But I cannot, he protested, silently, trying not to speak loudly. Wait, come back, he said aloud. But there was only silence as he protested the mysterious calling from the statue. But not everyone was asleep. The light awakened Navi, but he didn't move, didn't say a word. Closing his eyes again, Navi thought back to when he had first met Amace, recalling the prophetic instinct he felt of a certain destiny about him. Now he knew, as the words of the ancient prophet resounded in his head. A bearer of the sword will arise, who will bear the burden of it until it is placed in the hands of the immortal king. His origins are of ancient days, a people of long ago. He will carry the sword into the canvas of the earth, into dark portals and cursed byways, himself bearing the burden of the curse that pierced his side.